For the safety of listeners at home, following guidelines specified by the MPAA for film as a baseline, the following reading will be rated PG for scenes of fantasy violence and some dark imagery. The text read comes from a slightly earlier version of the novel. As such, wording may be different in certain places compared to the final published text. However, the author has endeavored to make sure that the reading and the novel are as close as possible. The Knight and the Unicorn. Chapter 7. Tristan and Serena. Serena trotted about the meadow, watching the edges for any sign of Tristan. Every once in a while she turned and looked at the sleeping form of Rosalind underneath the tree. She was so pure, yet so strong, that it was almost sad to see her like that. She fought the curses, the poisons, and the lighter unicorn was almost surprised that she had not woken up of her own accord. It was almost evening, and Serena was getting impatient. Tristan had been gone for a few hours now, less than the time he was at the mountain, but longer than she had expected. He was hardier and stronger than most Serena had seen, and his leaps and bounds and strength amused her. She hadn't received any sense of his death from the caves, which meant he was either weakened or delayed in his return. Many before him had died there. Only 2 others had come back in the last few months. The first was now dead, and the other had somehow been freed not long ago. Serena looked up and watched the entrances. Her anxiousness at his absence pestered her, disturbed her. No, it was more than that. She needed him back. There was one thing left to do, but it required him. It surprised her that she had become so attached to him. There was something in his eyes that kept their awe and wonder that many had dropped for blind devotion. There was something in his voice that kept its fire when others had somehow lost it all to charm. He was undyingly loyal, surprisingly powerful, and somehow gifted. Serena looked back at Rosalind. No wonder they had fallen for each other. Both fighters, both stronger than their exteriors would suggest. Rosalind, the daughter of a baker, had nearly escaped from powers stronger than most had magic not been used to subdue her. Tristan, the son of a common but prosperous farmer, had not just learned to wield the pitchfork and the shovel, but a full sword and shield with armor. Yes, there was power inside them both. She wanted it for her own. Her magic would take that power from Rosalind and sustain, if not increase, her strength. But Tristan? She would make him hers. He would keep his power and use it for her own desires. Serena looked around at the clearing, no longer as anxious. She could feel his aura coming closer. True, there was something different about it from when he left, but her Tristan was returning, and she was almost giddy at the thought. Tristan returned to the meadow in the same direction he had initially come in from. His sword was out, and his fist was clenched tightly around the amulet from the underground city. He approached Serena, whose eyes brightened at his approach, but seemed to be somewhat surprised. "Tristan," she called happily, "you've returned." "Yes," came Tristan's hard-boiled reply, "that I have." Serena came over to him and looked him over, walking around him. "But you seem strong and healthy. Not long ago I sensed you were almost close to dying." "Indeed I was," Tristan said, a determined look on his face. "You've put me through quite a bit, but I have done everything you asked, and just as you said." He opened his hands towards her to reveal the amulet. "Here's the amulet you have mentioned." Serena was ecstatic. She pranced around a little bit and began to sing. "O knight, you return from the caves of the dead. You'll soon have the chance with me to rest your head. Your soul seems morose, though again you've prevailed. O master of death, let me now cure thy nails. O heart, find your rest in my song and—" Serena stopped suddenly. The furrowed brow and piercing gaze of the knight were unfailing. Before, Tristan had gone agape with wonder and enchantment at her songs of praise. Now the songs that once charmed him seemed to do nothing. He stood watching her, mildly amused at her giddy prancing, but otherwise unaffected by the verse. It surprised her. She was not used to being surprised. "Tristan," she asked hesitantly, "is everything all right?" "How did you know about the undead and yet not tell me?" The fire was there in his voice, and Serena did not like it one bit. "Tristan, is something wrong?" "It's about time I got a few answers," Tristan said, his voice hard and uncompromising. "How did you know about the snake, or about the knight, or about the undead? If you wanted me to complete those tasks, why didn't you let me know about them, so that I could have returned here safely sooner? Serena stammered and whinnied. Tristan, why are you being so scary? Because I've been lied to, Serena. It's about time I figure out why you lied to me. Tristan pulled out the cross amulet that he had been given from the priest. He took the cord and gently wrapped it around his wrist, watching Serena back away in horror. She continued stammering and pleading for him to stop. A terrible transformation unfolded before Tristan's eyes. With every wrap of the cross's amulet cord around his wrist, Serena's coat became less and less like a pleasant sunset. The yellow turned to orange, the pink turned to a fiery red, the violets became dark and almost black. The horn became curved, and the hooves and mane that once sparkled in the sunlight now looked like they were drenched with blood. As the cross was secured on Tristan's wrist, Serena had turned from a beautiful, enchanting creature to a demonic, false unicorn. I have met the true guardian of this forest, Tristan said. He told me things, explained things, filled in the gaps that you neglected to even warn me of. So now, why do you want this amulet you made me get from the ruins? Serena trotted forwards as though trying to inspect or take the amulet for herself. But every time her roving eyes caught Tristan's cross, she backed up with a terrified whinny and refused to come within a few feet of him. My power, she said. My magic would be amplified by that artifact you now hold. I could heal Rosalind, restore her to life, if only you would let me. The voice that once enchanted and bewitched Tristan now sounded as though three voices were talking at once. One was the soft and lilting voice that Tristan knew, but one was a deep monotone, and the other was a growling noise that was almost like that of a feral beast. It held no power over him any more. It terrified Tristan and chilled him to the bone, but he stood his ground. Is that why you wanted to share the berries, too? Is that why you wanted water from a spring you couldn't otherwise touch? You helped me. You helped me when I was weak, and I can make you both stronger. Don't you dare make me pity you, Tristan shouted. None of that is true. You are the one who brought Rosalind here. You are the one who cursed her and poisoned her, and through your intentional negligence you tried to kill me by sending me off on these tasks. But have I truly lied to you? Serena asked. Have the things I told you about not helped you to restore your love? Oh, but they have, Tristan said. And so for that, I thank you. You are welcome, my dear Tristan. Now why don't we set our pasts aside and come to an agreement? I'm afraid I can't do that, Tristan said. If this amulet truly gives you power, then why don't I give it to the one who truly needs that power more? Tristan walked over to Rosalind and knelt down next to her on the grass. Serena sputtered out something indecipherable, paralyzed with confusion and still terrified by the cross pendant. But Tristan ignored her as he took the amulet from the ruins and placed it around Rosalind's neck. At first nothing seemed to happen, but soon Rosalind started coughing. The color mostly came back into her face, and she groaned, her first sounds of what might have been 3 or 4 days. She writhed for a little bit before calming down and finally opening her eyes, looking like she had just woken up from a horrible dream. But when she saw Tristan, she recognized his face almost immediately and jumped up and threw her arms around him. She did not care about the armor he wore, or the scars on his face, or the dirt, or the grime, or the weariness that showed on his features. She gasped and might almost have been crying, except when they parted and looked at each other her eyes were not wet, and she had a giant smile on her face. Tristan, she croaked out, you saved me. I told you I would go to the ends of the earth if it meant protecting you, Rosalind, Tristan said. And I mean that. No! The two whirled around at Serena's exclamation, her hooves stamping the ground beneath her. She snorted. You weren't supposed to save her! You were supposed to be loyal to me! You were supposed to be devoted to me! The unicorn's horn sparked and ignited, and Tristan and Rosalind found themselves facing a fireball coming down on them like a freight train. Tristan remembered his shield and quickly removed it from his back, hiding both himself and Rosalind behind it. The fireball hit the shield and dissipated into nothing, leaving Tristan and Rosalind unharmed, and Serena looking aghast. Tristan stood up and positioned himself between Rosalind and Serena. You've been responsible for quite a few deaths over the years, Enchantress, he said to the unicorn. It's about time your reign of terror was over. He raised his sword and shield defensively. Come at me, coward! If you wish to kill me, why not do so directly? Serena stamped on the ground and snorted. Tristan stood defiantly in front of Rosalind, his sword at the ready. Even in her weakened state, Rosalind stumbled to her feet and pulled at Tristan's side. Let me help, Rosalind said. You're weak from being knocked out for so long, Tristan told her. Go, eat some berries from the bushes at the edge of the clearing and drink water from the stream. I'll protect you, but quick, get behind the tree first. Rosalind nodded and got up, making for the tree. Serena charged between Tristan and the tree, but Tristan jumped in front and swung his sword. It did not hit Serena. The unicorn was smart enough to stop just in time and reared backwards. Tristan stepped back to avoid being hit by the flailing hooves, but Rosalind was now safely behind the tree. Drink from the stream first, Tristan said. I'll cover you. Serena turned around and ran for the other side of the clearing. Tristan followed her movements, staying protectively close to Rosalind. Serena charged as Rosalind was bending over to take a drink from the stream, and Tristan put a sword in front of him and jabbed like a rapier. This time he hit and nicked Serena's shoulder, causing the unicorn to whinny and turn away. Rosalind drank quickly as Serena prepared for another strike, but once again Tristan warded her off by striking with his sword. You are stronger and smarter than you look, Serena said. I'm sure we can talk things out and come to a reasonable agreement. If it was meant to be silky and disarming, it failed. Tristan still had the cross amulet wrapped around his wrist, and still saw the demonic form of the enchantress and heard the beastly growling. He merely gritted his teeth and prepared his sword for another charge. Serena met his challenge, horn lowered like a lance. Despite the slightly curved look, it also looked as sharp as a blade and was certainly quite as deadly. The unicorn charged and went straight for Tristan, who brought the sword down on her horn with an almost metallic clang. Tristan carefully parried each of Serena's strokes, blocking with the shield when necessary. Serena tried again and again to break through his defenses, but it wasn't enough. Tristan was effectively a living barrier between her and Rosalind. Horn and blade clashed, and Serena pushed and pushed against Tristan's sword with all her might, but he held firm. Let me have the girl, Serena growled. Let me have her and I'll let you go free. I'll be taking us both home, Tristan said, and you won't have another if I have anything to say about it. Then that's a shame, Serena said. I didn't want to kill you, but you're going to be trouble, so I must. Serena lifted her head and reared. Tristan, already thrown off balance by Serena's parry, crashed onto the floor as Serena reared up again. Tristan almost thought she was going for Rosalind, now done at the stream and hiding behind the tree again, but she came crashing down on Tristan's chest. Her hooves slammed on Tristan with great force, but the enchanted armor Tristan wore wasn't even dented. Despite being rattled around a bit in the metallic shell, Tristan himself was relatively unharmed and not even out of breath. Serena tried again and again to stomp on Tristan, but the armor blocked her every attempt. Tristan, meanwhile, had enough time to grab his sword and shield and put it up to his face by the time Serena tried to launch another fireball from her horn. Tristan swiped the shield and bashed it across Serena's muzzle. Blood went flying from the unicorn's mouth, and Serena jumped away with a pained whinny. Tristan scrambled to his feet and grabbed Rosalind's arm, guiding her as swiftly as he could to the berry bushes while Serena was shaking her muzzle. Eat the berries, Tristan said. It's quite a distance out of here and you need strength. And here, I have some bread left over. Take it. He pulled the bread quickly out of his pocket and gave it to Rosalind. The bushes seem a little thorny, Rosalind said, sounding a little stronger. I can hide behind here, at least for a little while. Do that, Tristan said. Eat, and then we'll see about getting you out of here. Tristan carved a small path for Rosalind to get through with his sword. Rosalind clambered into the bushes and hid, eating the berries and the rest of the loaf of bread. Tristan returned to the center of the meadow, only to find the scratch on Serena's shoulder healed and no more blood coming from her muzzle. You'll have a harder time than that slowing me down, Serena said. But I can say you're holding up quite well. Those who did manage to make it this far were usually killed by the fireball, though there weren't many to begin with. I know, Tristan said. I've seen every single one of their deaths. You're nothing but a menace and an outlaw that hasn't been brought to justice. You're a liar and a fraud. I did help you, no? Serena took a few steps toward him, but didn't charge. I helped you find the berries. I directed you to the spring. They did heal Rosalind of her poison, did they not? They did. They helped to cure the poison that you brought on her. And there were things in both places that could have killed me if I did not receive advance warning. You may have helped me a bit, but in the end you set me up to die. The forest has many dangers even without sorcerers wandering around. Who's to say there wouldn't have been problems even without this? The possession of Alexander, for one, was apparently done by you, Tristan said. He got blood on his sword, thanks to you. And what about the neglect of the poisonous thorns, or giving me the wrong vials, or the temptations and the undead in the ruins? None of those would be encountered if there wasn't some spur behind them. Very well, Serena said, half bowing. I acknowledge my little hurdles were indeed deliberately placed, but they helped you to become stronger. They were not meant to kill, they were meant to test. The problematic ones fail them. The strong ones overcome them. And became your thralls, Tristan retorted. In life or death you control them, and I am afraid most of them are dead thanks to you. An enticing prospect still, Serena said. You would not have your power if it wasn't for me. No, not because of you. Tristan hit his chest with a fist. See these colors? They are not yours. I would not have made it if it weren't for these items, and they have been given to me by someone else. He grabbed the horn. Serena backed up and stood still. It seems my own power isn't enough to overcome you, Tristan said, but I know a few who might be able to help. Tristan put his lips to the horn and blew 3 trumpet-like blasts that shook the clearing. The noise was deafening and rattled even Serena, who was shaking her head and nickering irritably to rid herself of the sound. The noise had just settled down, and Serena was just beginning to regain herself when a rustling came from one side of the clearing. The noise came closer and closer, and Soren jumped from the woods surrounding the meadow, looking quite regal yet awesome with his dark grey coat and a mane that looked like blue fire. On his back was Alexander, hardly any worse for wear than Tristan had last seen him. I should have warned you earlier, Alexander said with a grin as he hopped off Soren. Had I known why, I would have given you more advice. Never you mind that, Tristan said. How come you haven't left? Oh, I did, Alexander said. Long story short, that bottle was actually from her. I was the last to go through the tasks all the way, but when I emerged from the underground city, I was hers. You freed me from her when you broke that bottle, but not before I'd killed quite a few others that came through here. About time I atoned for that by helping you out. No one would blame you, Tristan said. It was not your fault anyways, and you seem to be of right mind now. But we have more pressing issues. I need to get Rosalind out of here, and somehow we need to kill her. So we do, Soren said. We are at your aid. Tristan thought quickly. Alexander, take my shield and go protect Rosalind, he said as he handed the artifact over. That shield should protect you from anything she throws at you. Meanwhile, I'll at least try to hold her off. How noble of you, Serena said, but my time's up and my interest is past. Come at me again. I'll let you live, Tristan, but keep your mind long enough to watch them all die. Tristan hopped up on Soren's back. Soren and Tristan followed Alexander over to the bushes where Rosalind was hiding, keeping a firm guard over the other knight. Serena eyed them, watching and waiting for a chance to strike. Soren lowered his horn in Serena's direction as Tristan set them up. Rosalind, are you still there? He called out, keeping his eyes trained on Serena. Yes, I am, Rosalind replied. The man by the bush is Alexander, Tristan said. I trust him with my life, and now I trust him with yours. He'll protect you. We'll cover your escape. You two must get to the edge of the clearing. All right, be careful, Tristan. Alexander helped Rosalind out of the bushes as they began to dart for the exit of the clearing. Serena dashed over to cut them off, and Soren charged at Serena with Tristan readying his sword for combat. Horn and horn clashed as Soren and Serena met, and Tristan came down and struck the false unicorn's shoulder with his blade. But Serena backed off towards the path back to town, and her wounds seemed to close back up. We must drive her away, Tristan called. That may be the least of your worries, Soren said. Her horn is what's vulnerable. Strike at it, and she will not have the magic to pursue us out of these woods. Serena merely snorted and charged at them again. Alexander led Rosalind away as Soren and Serena continued their deadly jousting. Whenever they clashed, Tristan reached over and struck at Serena's horn, but the horn had the strength of diamond, and even the enchanted blade didn't seem to leave a scratch. Tristan, Alexander called, take your shield. Perhaps a blunt force will crack the horn. Are you sure? Tristan called as Soren and Serena charged at each other again. You will have nothing to defend yourself. Her magic is powerful. The sword may be the thing to serve the final blow, but I remember what this shield is for. Soren told me once too long ago, to protect those who need protecting the most. I am here to help and to atone, but the prize is ultimately yours to protect. Use it to protect Rosalind. Tristan nodded and turned Soren around. They charged over to Alexander and picked up the shield, with Tristan holding the shield in his dominant hand and the sword in the other. They faced Serena, who guarded the path leading away from the clearing, and charged again. When Soren and Serena clashed, Tristan went down and bashed the shield against Soren's horn. That's done it, Soren said. I heard something cracking. Serena threw up her horn. Soren reared backwards, and Tristan was thrown off. In desperation, Rosalind started running over to where Tristan was lying on the ground, groaning from impact. Alexander started running after her. This was exactly what Serena wanted. There was a crackling from her horn, and a beam of light shot out from it towards Rosalind. But Alexander, considerably faster and much less weary than she was, pushed Rosalind out of the way of the light beam. He shrieked as the beam of light consumed him, with Rosalind crawling out of the way to where Tristan's sword was lying on the ground. Tristan watched from his position as Alexander was consumed by the light from the unicorn's horn. Soren reared again and dashed away from Tristan as Serena attempted to swing it over towards the dark unicorn, temporarily blinding Tristan on the ground. But when the light went away and Tristan's vision returned, Alexander was nowhere to be found, as though he'd been completely disintegrated. Tristan noticed the cross was beginning to unravel from his hand, but the toll of the last 2 days was beginning to take their effect on him, and as he reached for it, he felt a pain in his legs and back. He lay on the ground, panting, as Serena came over to him, the red looking a little lighter than before. "You poor soul," Serena told him. "I could give you everything you want and more." Serena kicked him with a hoof, and Tristan rolled across the clearing. The cross unraveled from his wrist a little more, and Tristan struggled to right it. "I made you strong. I cheered for you the whole way. I gave you a reprieve when you needed it most. I could make you stronger, and I could give you so much more." Serena bent down, stuck her horn on Tristan, and threw him across the clearing. Tristan was launched into the tree, and his arm flung out, but it was too late. There was a searing pain from his arm, and Tristan was screaming as he tried to hold on to the shield and cross as much as he could. Serena walked almost predatorily over towards him, the golden pink starting to show back in her coat. "Weren't you so happy when you were here with me?" she asked, the growling subsiding with every step she took towards Tristan. "Didn't you like seeing me? Hearing my voice proclaim your victory in return?" Tristan tried to argue, but it was drowned in screams of pain from the broken arm. Serena tucked her horn under him and threw him again. Tristan slammed into the dirt and rolled through the grass, landing with his back in the stream. Soren reached him first, and Tristan felt something like a pinch on his back until he was being lifted gently up and out of the stream and set on Soren's back with his magic. He gripped his arm tight as he could and tried to hang on to the unicorn through the pain. "Why do you trust him?" Serena said sweetly, watching Tristan try to hang on to Soren with all his might. "He's a stranger to you, Tristan. He speaks in riddles. You aren't sure of me, but what of him? Why did you believe him and choose to trust him, despite your doubts?" "I'd never doubted you, Tristan. I never did, because I was sure you would make it." Tristan readied his shield. "He spoke in riddles," he said, "but he never lied to me. He's a sorcerer in his own right. What if he enchanted you to think that way?" Serena pawed at the ground, horn pointed like a lance towards Soren. "Come here, my Tristan, and let me free you from him." Tristan gave Soren a light kick, and they launched forwards. Tristan gripped the shield tight as he could as Soren bore down on Serena. As the two unicorns were just about to meet, Tristan motioned for Soren to sharply turn away. Tristan swung his good arm with the shield outwards and aimed directly for Serena's horn. The horn shattered not far from the base by her forehead. Serena suddenly reared and kicked Soren, launching Tristan off his back as the unicorn rolled over. Soren was hit, but not terribly hurt. But Tristan landed with his back on the ground and felt the wind get punched out of him. The cross and shield both left Tristan's hands, the cross lying a few inches away while the shield skittered across the clearing until it was sitting almost by where Rosalind had taken shelter under the tree. She quickly picked up the shield and placed it in front of her defensively, adjusting the sword in her grip. Tristan looked up and got a view of the cross. If he could just reach it, then at least Serena wouldn't be able to deceive him again. He reached out with his good hand, but the leather cord was just out of his reach. He tried and tried and tried, but he could not reach his arm enough to get the cross. A weight began to press down on Tristan. He looked up and saw that Serena had come over and, despite her broken horn, was now lying down on his chest. Tristan struggled to move, but the unicorn had him pinned. She was as pretty as he had first seen her. Her white coat was accented with shimmering pink and golden trails, and she looked almost like the beautiful creature he thought she was. Her violet eyes stared kindly down at him, as though, with all he had recently done, she had forgiven him and wanted no more animosity between them. Tristan could almost make out a smile on the horse-like mouth, like she was finally at peace. "No," Tristan muttered. "Please, let me go." "You're hurt, Tristan," Serena said gently. "Let me heal you." "Don't want pain. Reminder of truth." "I have been telling you the truth," Serena said calmly. "My truth. The only one that mattered to you. And the only one that does matter here." And she began to sing. "My voice give you strength, magic steel your resolve. Round what other beauty has thine quest revolved? Through my word and your deed our hearts are now bound. With me your eternal reward shall be found. So lay down your arms, stay with me in this place. Let yourself fall in my enchantment embrace. My grace and poise are like the heavens above. Forget the world, for I am now—" A horrendous shriek filled the clearing. Serena's mane suddenly ignited into red flames as she looked backwards towards her stomach. Taking the opportunity while the unicorn was focused on Tristan, Rosalind had come up quietly so as not to distract Serena and jabbed the sword into her side. A pinkish mist began to erupt from the wound, and Rosalind jumped backwards to avoid it in case it was poisonous, letting go of the sword and leaving it in the wound. Serena shrieked and whinnied and screamed, but more and more of her body became absorbed by the mist. Soon her entire body was consumed by the mist, and it blew away with the breeze, her screams dying into an echo. The meadow was calm and still, and the sword lay unstained in the grass where the unicorn had been. Rosalind took the sword and shield, picked up the cross, and went over to Tristan. The young man was dazed by the spell that Serena had begun to weave over him, and he didn't respond to any of Rosalind's cries out to him. Soren, back in control of himself, trotted over with his own wounds healed. "Is he all right?" Rosalind asked. "You cut off the spell at the last moment," Soren replied grimly. "I'm afraid we'll have to wait and see if and when he breaks out from its effects. For now, there's not much more we can do except tend to your wounds. Can you help us with that?" "Not terribly, unfortunately. I'll use magic of my own to put Tristan to sleep, and we'll head back to your village under the cover of night. We must get both of you to a doctor, and get you some food." "Of course," Rosalind replied. "Take the sword, the shield, and the cross pendant," Soren said. "I have a feeling you may need them." Soren lifted Tristan onto his back and put him into a deep sleep. Rosalind jumped up behind Tristan, holding him tightly and making sure she had all the necessary items, and kicked Soren's side when she was ready. The three exited the clearing, and Soren trotted through the woods, leading them back to Elindria. It seemed like they had hardly left the clearing when they emerged from the woods into the plains around Elindria, where it had seemed like evening in the meadow. On the plains it was a dark night, some 3 nights after Tristan had left to find Rosalind, the moon out and the fields and town dark and quiet. Soren trotted across the field as quickly as he could and made his way down Elindria's main streets. Soren explained the enchantress' magic was already beginning to leave the forest, but she was merely weakened, not defeated. Rosalind and Tristan would have to stay inside the town for a few days. And anyways, they might have to take a few days to recover from both their ordeals. Rosalind remained quiet and did not respond except for leading Soren to the doctor's offices. Soren dropped them off quietly at the door of the offices and left before he could be seen. No use for the townspeople thinking him the enchantress or a familiar. Rosalind, weak and exhausted herself, barely heard him but gave a quiet thank you as he left. Rosalind quietly knocked on the door and shouted hoarsely for someone to come and help her. The door opened and the doctor soon looked at the scene in surprise. Rosalind, pale-faced and weak from exhaustion, was standing over Tristan, decked out in armor, bruised and scarred badly, knocked out but still breathing. But both were alive and had returned from the enchantress's wood. Here ends Chapter 7. Next week, The Knight and the Unicorn, Chapter 8.